Final update, I found out that my husband is sleeping with my friends because they have something that he desire that I can never fulfill. Now he's screwed. And now it's been about 2 years. Feels like for freaking ever ago, and at the same time, it all feels like it happened yesterday. I ought to get the bad news out of the way first. Kai and I had a pretty nasty fallout. I don't want to dive into the nitty-gritty details, but to sum it all up in a gift wrap, we were roommates, pretty involved in one another's business, yada yada. Basically, every time I went to the store, he knew. Every time he came home from work, I knew. Our whereabouts were always mentally noted just because of our proximity and how we divvied up our house chores and whatnot. At some point, Kai tells me he's going on a date with a girl. Yay, good for him. In my case, this was just a few months after D-Day, and I was still in the middle of the messy divorce proceedings, plus I wasn't really in the headspace for another relationship, so I wasn't even considering dating just yet. Since Kai and Marie didn't have a ring yet, they could break it off a little more cleanly, but obviously not perfect. He went on the date, and then he went on another date, and then it stopped. Eventually, after a week of no dates, I asked what happened out of curiosity, and he told me simply that she'd ghosted him. It wasn't until a week later on a totally random evening that he dropped the sparkly rainbow glitter bomb on me. He had tried to see Marie again. I know. That is pretty crazy behavior, right? Well, he was telling me this, crying and blubbering like a baby on his couch, and I couldn't help but feel bad for him since the road to recovery from a blown-up relationship is rough. He told me that those dates had helped him realize it was over and over. He described it like, and I'm probably mincing words here, when he first met Marie, she had this sweet girl next door customer service facade. As he got to know her better, he revealed this fun-loving, wild-spirited girl underneath her, who he says he fell in love with. But then, when he met up with her again that month, she was right back to her factory settings, which hurt him because it felt like he'd started at square one all over again. He not only ghosted her after 2 dates but blocked her everywhere. It was a bit of a tough decision for me, but I decided to brush it off and console him instead of really caring. Things were clear for another few months after that. In that time, Kai morphed me into a total gym girl, haha. Reading my last posts. It's so funny how iffy I was about the gym. Anyway, after those few halcyon months, Kai breaks the news to me again that he's going on another date, this time with a friend of a mutual friend we have. Again, I was like, oh, go for it. At this time, again, I was all muddled up in divorce proceedings and still sulking over my crumpled marriage, so dating still wasn't on the table for me. As I mentioned, we both kept tabs on each other because of how our arrangement was structured. So when Kai started leaving at 2 p.m. and coming home at 8 p.m., and his other dates with this girl had these equally long time frames, if not longer, I immediately noticed. Of course, I didn't bring it up since I assumed he was having a great time with her or something along those lines, but his absence on date days was noticeable. He'd even request that I run some of his more minor errands he knew he'd miss on those days just because of how long he was gone. Eventually, I met this girl, Grace, who was super sweet and a teacher. Things seemed to be going great. Kai and Grace were adorable, summer was passing, and everything was hunky-dory. I also officially divorced my ex-husband. But dang it, those dates were just so long. Even his short meetups were at least 3 to 4 hours of him just gone. And so finally, I subtly bring it up. Kai then tells me that Grace mainly plans their date spots, usually an hour or 2 away from here with traffic. When I asked him where Grace lived, Kai said, not sure. At that point, maybe I'd read too many infidelity forums or something, but alarms were going off in my head. Grace probably didn't live too far off, considering she was friends with one of our friends, and after months of dating, Kai didn't even know where she lived. The date spots are all purposefully super far away. To me, it sounded a little off. This was where I probably overstepped. I go on Instagram searching her name. And voila, I found Kai's girlfriend, Grace, in a wedding dress with this guy, Mike, back in 2019. She's married. Yikes. I wake up Kai immediately and spill it all with receipts. It's midnight, he's bleary-eyed with work at 7 tomorrow, and I've barged into his room wide-eyed and gesturing at the phone screen like a crazy person. It's all a mess. Finally, after I shut up, Kai gets mad. Like, fuming. He interrogated me as to why I was getting all up in Grace's business, and then when I told him about the red flags, he got even more mad. The entire argument spiraled out of control. He told me I was way overstepping my boundaries. I asked him why he was mad at me for trying to look out for him. It turned into a giant screaming match. Eventually, he went to the next level. He rambled on about how this was all probably because I was secretly into him and that he'd always thought our relationship had gotten closer than it needed to be, which is why I was stalking him. That's when I got really mad and said some awful things I wish I could take back. I dug at him for his situation with Marie, that I'd never date him for $1 million, and then it devolved into him calling me some nasty names, and I just had to walk out. It was nasty. We were both exhausted and aggravated. It all just blew into 1,000 pieces in the span of one night. He woke me up early the next morning before he left. I thought the night had been time for our heads to cool, and he'd come to apologize, but instead, he decided to drop the news on me plainly, which he'd admitted he was bearing on his shoulders for a while. Kai knew. He knew Grace was married since close to day one, but he'd shrugged it off. Her husband was nice, but Grace told Kai she couldn't feel for him anymore. And that explained why the gas bill for all those far-off dates didn't faze him. I'll admit, I wasn't too happy to hear this. I asked him how he would feel if Marie's hookups had known she was married and still went for her, to which Kai got mad all over again and told me not to bring Marie into this. We argued again, definitely not as explosive as the night before but still pretty flaming, where Kai told me that he'd avoided telling me all this time because he knew I'd make a big deal out of it. I told him that infidelity was obviously personal to me and I honestly expected it was for him, too, to which he just straight up said it wasn't and that being roommates with me was as exhausting as a full-time relationship and that I had no control over who he dated. So I was like, yeah, fine, date whoever you want. I just thought you needed to know that you were helping her cheat. I didn't mean for this to blow out of proportion. He said that was fine by him and just left for work. I wasn't Kai's mother or something where I needed to dictate his relationships. I just thought Kai wanted to know, that he was being the other man here. If I were in a relationship with a married man, I'd want someone to tell me, and based on my standards, I'd break it off with said man. But if Kai had different morals regardless of our shared experiences, that was fine too. I just didn't want to associate with someone who perpetuated cheating. I didn't really have to move out of Kai's. He was nice enough not to kick me out and make me homeless overtly, but things were definitely tough and distant between us for the next while, and I'd lost respect for him in all honesty. He continued to see Grace and also the idea he had that I was interested in him, but it wasn't great. Finally, I was able to get together all my stuff and move out, to which I moved in with a family friend, and I was ultimately better off even though it was pretty far from where I worked. I ought to provide an update on the man himself, my ex-husband. Well, after we officially divorced, he got engaged to another woman. Around this time, right after I moved out, I think I just about hit rock bottom. The whole AI panic with student work started happening in my district. I was beginning the process of moving out properly into my place, all while I was in a new community where I didn't really know anybody overall. I was pretty lonely and down all the time. I went on a few dates, but I gave it up, but they were mediocre. Wouldn't go back to those days for the world. My ex-husband contacted me and told me about his engagement and all the good news. He tells me he's on some life improvement path and wants to clean up his act, starting with giving me a good apology. He offered to meet me in person, locally, swearing up and down this wasn't a date, nor was he expecting me to accept said apology. I should have been much more assertive, but I was totally beat down from life, and I felt like a totally different person, in a sucky, no good way, so I agreed like an idiot. Maybe an apology rather than a loose end would help me feel better about things. It went just as well as you'd expect it to. It started okay, where we shared pleasantries, and he actually apologized for everything. But then he started pressing me about how my life was going. I tried not to tell him too many details, saying the kids were fine, I was doing fine, and whatever else was happening. But I guess I must have said one or too many things because he quickly picked up on how miserable my life was. He then had this Cheshire cat grin as he began to boast about his great new life, his hot girlfriend, her shiny engagement ring, and how everything was going great and amazing for him. He casually drops that his life has been leagues better than ever and that our separation was a blessing dressed as a curse. Can't lie and say it didn't hurt to hear the years I'd put in with him felt like burdens to him. At this point, he's most definitely rubbing it in, and eventually, I get fed up with hearing him talk and weasel my way out of there. Ultimately, I never got invited to the wedding, so did we make amends? Either way, I totally regretted doing all that. Total waste of my time, and it only dug me deeper into that depression pit. Frown alas, things eventually start looking up when you least expect it. After a long while of dragging myself through each day by the hair, I finally went on one more date. I'd lost a lot of weight and looked pretty sunken and pale, so I didn't think I'd make a great first impression, but what do you know? Fate can make things happen like magic. That's where I met my current partner, Chase, the greatest thing ever happening to me. He's so patient, undeniably sweet, so chatty and lively. Seriously. I'm used to being the loud and silly ones in relationships, and I used to think I'd like a guy who'd offset my energy, smirk, and roll his eyes at my jokes, whatever. Many people seem to throw themselves in that cliché, but let me give you some sage advice. If you're a ray of sunshine, don't search for the aloof, tall, dark, and handsome Mr. Right. Please search for someone who matches your bright energy. It's so refreshing. I've been missing this all my life, thinking I wanted a straight-laced sucker. I've never felt so much more loved and complete with this big goofball. No more biscuits and butters being biscuits and butters, no more one-sided conversations, no more of those half-hearted scoff laughs dudes do to seem cool. We make the silliest jokes and the most legendary memories, and it feels so indescribably alive. Our conversations about the most oddball of topics are so strangely deep, and I never felt bored around him. If I keep going on about him, I think my fingers will break because of how much I type. Geez, Louise. But anyway, there's a little more I have to cover, so I'm just gonna get straight to it. It's late 2024, and the year started back up again. I'm head over heels for Chase, everything's going just fine. I moved properly into my place a little while before that, back closer to my job and whatnot, but I didn't start returning to my old gym until then. That's when I saw Kai again. He didn't notice me for a few days, but when he did, he immediately approached me. He cordially apologized and told me he'd been worried sick since I'd had no contact with him. He told me he said many stupid things that he regretted, and if I ever wanted to be friends again, he was always open to it. And that was it. It's 2025 now, and I have no clue if Kai's still with Grace. Kai has no clue that I'm with Chase. But I still see him around in the gym. So, I haven't yet properly connected with him since his apology. Maybe I should, but honestly? This likely isn't the best way to describe it, but Kai feels like a recurring character from the first movie who is making an abrupt appearance in the second or third movie. It's a weird feeling I'm probably making up, but I feel like I'm on a totally different chapter of my life now, what with Chase and my life happenings, so far beyond the events of my ex-husband and Marie and every other part of that time period. Speaking of the legend himself, I actually got around to showing Chase a rendition of Lotion Man. I won't lie, I was shaking a little bit. But to top this all off with a nice little cherry for all you happy ending lovers, not only did he find Lotion Man absolutely hilarious with a full-on belly laugh, it's a bit of a running joke between us now. We've got Soap Man, Ketchup Man, Shaving Cream Man, Floor Dust Man, basically anything we can create little smiley guys with, we make them real. And they all have silly accents, too. Lotion Man, the world is your oyster. And with that, that's basically it. I guess the one lesson I've learned coming out of all of this and coming out of my 20s is that being unapologetically you will always do wonders, no matter what. Things change. Life moves. It'll always get better. If you shine too bright for the small box that is your life, then it's not your fault for being too radiant, you just need to get out of that damn box. I'll never apologize for being myself again.